My family stole my inheritance to fund my sister's wedding, so I sued them all. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I watched my sister spin in a $10,000 dress, completely unaware she was wearing my stolen future. That is the image that burns in my mind whenever I think back to how this nightmare began. But let me take you to the climax first. The rehearsal dinner was in full swing, a lavish affair bursting with crystal glasses, imported champagne, and the loud, obnoxious laughter of my father's golf buddies. I stood by the grand mahogany doors, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs, as I watched a man in a cheap gray suit walk right up to my father. He handed Thomas a thick, manila envelope. The process server did his job quickly, loudly declaring that my father had been legally served. My dad's smug, affluent smile evaporated instantly as he broke the seal. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. Let me rewind. My name is Sophia. I am 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the responsible, frugal daughter. I work incredibly hard, save every penny, and pour my soul into my ultimate dream of opening a cozy neighborhood bakery. I live in a cramped, drafty apartment, drive a sputtering 10-year-old car, and never ask anyone for a single dime. My grandparents noticed this, specifically Grandma Rose. She was a sharp, observant woman who loved her family, but saw through all the fake suburban facades. Before she passed away, she set up a generous trust fund, just over $80,000, specifically designated for me. It was her gift to ensure I could buy a home or start my bakery without being crushed by predatory loans. The money was held in a formal trust, and my father, Thomas, was named the executor. I wasn't allowed to touch a single cent until my 20th birthday. Thomas was a man who valued image above all else. He was a mid-level corporate manager who liked to project the aura of a wealthy CEO. He wore tailored suits, drove a leased luxury sedan, and constantly worried about what the neighbors thought of our family. Still, it was a sacred promise. I trusted my father implicitly to guard that money because I believed he respected Grandma's dying wishes. I thought the trust fund was safe, resting quietly in a high-yield account, growing until the day I finally blew out 28 candles. I had no idea my own father was the monster hiding in the dark. To understand how we reached this point of total family destruction, you have to understand my sister, Chloe. She is 25 years old and the undeniable golden child of the family. From the moment she could speak, she knew exactly how to wrap our parents around her little finger. If I wanted a new bicycle, I had to mow lawns all summer. If Chloe wanted a new iPhone, she just had to pout at the dinner table until my mother, Helen, caved in. Helen is a master manipulator who weaponizes guilt better than anyone I have ever met. She always insisted that because I was the older, stronger sister, it was my duty to accommodate Chloe's fragile emotional needs. This dynamic dominated our entire childhood. I was expected to be entirely self-sufficient, while Chloe was treated like fragile royalty. Grandma Rose absolutely hated this blatant favoritism. She used to sit with me on the porch, sipping iced tea, and she would tell me not to let them break my spirit. "You work for what you have, Sophia," she would say, "and that builds a character they could never buy." When Grandma's will was read, Helen and Thomas were genuinely shocked to discover she had bypassed them entirely, placing the bulk of her liquid assets into my trust. Chloe received a modest cash gift, which she blew on a European vacation in less than a month. Helen tried to convince me to share my trust with my sister, arguing that it wasn't fair for one sibling to have a safety net while the other struggled. I refused, citing Grandma's explicit instructions. That was the first time I saw the dark resentment flash in my mother's eyes. Thomas stepped in, playing the peacemaker, assuring me that as the executor, he would fiercely protect the funds until I came of age. He promised me the money was locked up tight and completely inaccessible. Grandma thought she protected me, but she handed the keys directly to a thief. The real trouble started about 14 months ago when Chloe got engaged to a guy named Bradley. Bradley was perfectly nice, but he came from a wealthy family, and Chloe became immediately obsessed with proving she belonged in his social bracket. The wedding planning quickly spiraled from a joyful celebration into an absolute circus of absurd extravagance. Suddenly, everything had to be custom, designer, and outrageously expensive. My parents, who had always lived comfortably but practically, were suddenly talking about securing a historical estate for the venue, hiring a celebrity florist, and commissioning custom ice sculptures for the cocktail hour. Sophia, stop being so painfully practical, Chloe snapped during one dress fitting. This is a royal wedding, not a backyard barbecue. I bit my tongue and helped her adjust the massive train. I sat at Sunday dinners listening to them casually drop numbers that made my stomach churn. The string quartet is only 5,000, Helen would say, waving her hand dismissively. And Chloe simply must have the Vera Wang gown. It's the most important day of her life. I remember looking across the table at Thomas, expecting him to be the voice of financial reason. Instead, he just smiled proudly and topped off his wine glass. I wondered how on earth my middle-class parents were affording what was rapidly becoming a six-figure event. I even asked my mother privately if they were taking out a second mortgage. Helen just laughed, a sharp, condescending sound, and told me not to worry my pretty little head about adult finances. I was deeply focused on my own future. My 28th birthday was fast approaching, and I had already started scouting commercial real estate for my bakery. I found the perfect corner unit with giant glass windows and a rustic brick interior. The landlord required a hefty down payment, but I wasn't worried. I had $80,000 waiting for me. I spent my evenings sketching floor plans and testing out new pastry recipes, completely oblivious to the financial bloodbath happening right beneath my nose. The math did not add up, but I never suspected I was the one paying. The morning of my 28th birthday arrived, and I woke up feeling electric. This was the day my entire life was supposed to change. I didn't even care about a birthday party. My only goal was to drive straight to the bank and officially transfer the trust funds into my personal business account. I wore my best blazer, brought all my identification, and walked into the grand lobby of the downtown branch feeling like a conqueror. I sat down with a bank manager named Mr. Davis, a kind, balding man who had worked there for years. I smiled brightly and handed him my trust documents. "I'm 28 today," I said proudly. "I'd like to initiate the transfer for the Sophia Rose Trust." Mr. Davis smiled back, typed my information into his computer, and waited. A few seconds later, his smile faltered. He hit the enter key again, leaning closer to the screen. The color rapidly drained from his face, leaving him looking ashen and terrified. "Sophia," he stammered, removing his glasses to wipe off sudden sweat. "There must be some kind of clerical error. Let me go speak with the branch director." He disappeared for what felt like an eternity. My stomach tied itself into a tight, agonizing knot. When he finally returned, he wasn't smiling. He held a thick file folder, his hands visibly shaking. "Sophia, I am so deeply sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The account, it's empty." I stared at him, completely uncomprehending. I told him that was impossible. The money was locked. "The trust stipulated that the executor had emergency withdrawal privileges for your medical or educational needs," he explained gently. "Over the last 6 months, the entire balance of $82,000 has been systematically drained." I felt the room spinning violently around me. "Are you telling me someone stole it?" I gasped, struggling to pull air into my lungs. "Mr. Davis looked down at his desk, refusing to make eye contact with me. "I cannot make legal accusations," he replied softly, "but I can show you the transaction history. My bakery, my future, the safety net Grandma Rose built for me. It was all gone in an instant." The bank manager finally slid a stack of withdrawal slips across his mahogany desk. My hands trembled so violently I could barely hold the pieces of paper. I stared down at the crisp white withdrawal slips, my eyes desperately scanning the ink. Each slip represented a massive chunk of my future, ripped away without a second thought. $10,000 on March 4th, $15,000 on April 12th, $22,000 right before the summer began. But the most horrifying detail wasn't the staggering amounts. It was the signature at the bottom of every single page. It was Thomas's distinct, looping handwriting. My father had authorized every transaction. I felt a wave of profound nausea wash over me as I pulled out my phone and frantically opened Chloe's social media pages. I started cross-referencing the dates on the bank slips with her excited wedding updates. The $10,000 coincided perfectly with the week she bragged about securing her exclusive, elite florist. The $15,000 aligned exactly with the deposit for the historical mansion venue. The 22,000 was withdrawn exactly 3 days before she posted a video of herself twirling in a custom, glittering designer gown, sobbing about saying yes to the dress. The timeline was undeniable. He had abused his power as the trustee, fabricating educational expenses to bypass the bank's security protocols, just to funnel my inheritance directly into the wedding industrial complex. The sheer audacity of the betrayal paralyzed me. This wasn't a desperate mistake made to save someone's life or pay for a medical emergency. This was calculated, cold-blooded theft for the sake of ice sculptures and silk napkins. I sat in the hard leather chair, staring blankly at Mr. Davis, who was quietly offering me a glass of water. I didn't want water. I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. My own parents had looked me in the eye at family dinners, smiling and asking me about my bakery plans, knowing full well they were actively bleeding my account dry to fund a party. They let me keep sketching floor plans for a building I could no longer afford. Every smile they gave me was a vicious lie. My father had forged my entire future into a series of blank checks for Chloe. I didn't bother calling. I drove straight to my parents' house, clutching the copies of the bank statements like a shield. I burst through the front door, finding Helen and Thomas peacefully sipping coffee in the sunroom, completely relaxed. "Sophia? What a surprise. Happy birthday, darling." Helen sang out, not even looking up from her iPad. I slammed the bank folder down onto the glass coffee table with enough force to make their mugs rattle. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a rage I had never experienced before. Thomas looked at the papers, and his face instantly hardened. There was no shock, no confusion. He knew exactly what they were. "Sit down, Sophia. You're being incredibly dramatic," Helen sighed, rolling her eyes as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum over a toy. I screamed that they stole $80,000 from me. Thomas finally spoke, his voice dangerously calm. "We didn't steal anything. You are family." Chloe was in a bind, and the wedding expenses got completely out of hand. We needed liquidity, and your money was just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded by the sheer arrogance of his words. "That was my money for my bakery. Grandma left it to me," I yelled. Helen stood up, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Your sister's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We have to maintain our standing in the community. You are being horribly selfish for trying to ruin her joy. We said we would pay you back eventually." I laughed hysterically, tears finally spilling over my cheeks. "When? In 10 years? 20? You committed fraud, Dad. You broke the law." Thomas stepped toward me, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. "I am your father," he growled, "and I made an executive decision for the good of this family. If you had any loyalty, you would understand that family comes first." I realized then that they truly believed they had done nothing wrong. To them, my life and my dreams were just collateral damage in their desperate quest to give the golden child everything she demanded. They looked at me not with guilt, but with the annoyed glare of inconvenienced thieves. Leaving my parents' house, I felt completely unmoored. A small, naive part of my brain desperately wanted to believe that Chloe had no idea about the theft. I wanted to believe that if my sister knew her dream wedding was built on the ashes of my bakery, she would be horrified and demand our parents fix it. I drove to her upscale apartment, banging on the door until she answered in a silk robe, holding a clipboard full of seating charts. I pushed past her and laid it all out. I explained the empty account, the forged signatures, and the exact dates her vendors were paid. I waited for the shock, the tears, the apologies. Instead, Chloe just let out a heavy, exhausted sigh and crossed her arms. "Mom texted me you were on the warpath," she mumbled, looking entirely unbothered. "Honestly, Sophia, why do you always have to make everything about you?" I was so stunned I actually lost my footing and stumbled backward. She knew. She had known all along. "Chloe, they stole my inheritance," I pleaded, trying to make her understand the gravity of the situation. "I can't buy my house. I can't open my business." Chloe rolled her eyes, her face twisting into an ugly sneer. "It's just a stupid little house, Sophia. You can buy one in a few years. Bradley's parents are paying for the honeymoon, and Mom and Dad couldn't let them think we were poor. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that would be for me?" She stepped closer, poking my chest with her manicured finger. "This is my special time. You are ruining my energy with this toxic obsession over money." Grow up and stop being such a jealous, bitter spinster. You're wearing a dress paid for with my grandmother's dying gift, I whispered, feeling the last shred of my familial love wither and die. Chloe scoffed, turning back to her seating charts as if I were nothing more than an annoying salesperson at her door. Grandma is dead, she replied coldly. I'm alive, and I have a wedding to plan. Let yourself out. The cruelty was so casual, so effortless, that it took my breath away. She smiled as she told me a house could wait, but a wedding was forever. The next morning, I woke up with a cold, terrifying clarity. The tears were gone, replaced by a deep, hardened resolve. If they wanted to treat my life like a disposable bank account, I was going to treat them like the criminals they were. I spent hours researching the best estate litigation lawyers in the state, completely bypassing the cheap local attorneys. I needed a shark. That is how I found Mr. Sterling. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with sharp gray eyes and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in the courtroom. Sitting in his plush, mahogany-paneled office, I laid out the trust documents, the withdrawal slips, and the vendor receipts. I explained the entire situation, keeping my emotions completely in check. Mr. Sterling listened in absolute silence, reviewing the paperwork with meticulous precision. When he finally looked up, his expression was completely devoid of sympathy, replaced by predatory legal calculus. Your father did not just make a mistake, Sophia, Mr. Sterling stated plainly, tapping his expensive pen against the forged documents. He committed blatant fraud. He breached his fiduciary duty as the executor of a legally binding trust. In the eyes of the law, this is a felony. Hearing a professional validate my reality was overwhelmingly powerful. He explained that we could sue Thomas directly for the stolen funds, plus damages, and we could also name Helen and Chloe as accomplices who knowingly benefited from the stolen assets. I must warn you, Mr. Sterling said, leaning forward. Once we file this, there is no going back. It will become public record. It will tear your family apart, and your father could potentially face severe criminal charges if the authorities decide to pursue it. I looked him dead in the eye and told him they tore the family apart the moment they forged my name. They didn't care about my future, so why should I care about theirs? I replied, my voice steady and cold. I want every single penny back, Mr. Sterling. I want them held completely accountable for what they did to me. A small, dangerous smile touched the corners of the lawyer's mouth. Excellent, he said softly. Then let us prepare to drop a legal bomb on this ridiculous wedding. Mr. Sterling folded his hands and asked if I was ready to destroy my father. Despite my burning anger, a tiny sliver of my conscience demanded that I give them one final opportunity to make it right before I went fully nuclear. I drafted a formal, emotionless email to my parents and Chloe. I laid out the exact sum of money stolen, $82,000 for $150. I stated that if the entire amount was not wired back into a secure account under my sole name within 7 days, I would be forced to take severe and immediate legal action. I didn't mention Mr. Sterling or the massive lawsuit we were actively building. I hit send and waited. Less than 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Helen. She didn't sound scared or apologetic. She sounded absolutely furious. How dare you threaten us like some kind of common thug, she shrieked into the receiver. After everything we have done for you, you send us an extortion letter? I calmly reminded her that asking for my stolen property to be returned was not extortion. Thomas got on the line, laughing a deep, condescending chuckle. Listen to me, little girl, he sneered. You don't have the money for a lawyer, and no judge is going to care about a family dispute over wedding expenses. Stop throwing this pathetic tantrum. Helen took the phone back and delivered what she clearly thought was the ultimate death blow. Since you are so obsessed with ruining your sister's happiness, you are officially disinvited from the wedding. Do not contact us again until you are ready to apologize. She hung up, leaving me listening to the dead air. I actually smiled. I forwarded the entire email chain and the record of the phone call directly to Mr. Sterling. They refused the ultimatum, I typed in the message. They also confirmed in writing that they consider the theft a mere family dispute over wedding expenses. Mr. Sterling replied within 3 minutes. Their arrogance is our greatest asset. The grace period is officially over. We filed the paperwork on Monday. I felt a massive weight lift off my chest. The guilt was completely gone, replaced by a terrifying, focused calm. They thought locking me out of the wedding would successfully bury their terrible crimes forever. The next few weeks were a blur of intense, surgical legal maneuvering. Mr. Sterling was a master of his craft, operating with cold, terrifying efficiency. Because we were preparing to sue for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, we needed airtight proof of exactly where the stolen trust funds went. Sterling immediately began issuing subpoenas to all of Chloe's high-end wedding vendors. The reactions were incredibly satisfying. The celebrity florist, the exclusive caterer, and the bridal boutique all handed over their financial records without a fight, terrified of being implicated in a fraud investigation. We spent hours in Sterling's conference room, mapping out the money trail on a massive whiteboard. "Look at this," Mr. Sterling said, tracing a line with a red marker. "On May 12th, your father withdrew $15,000 from your trust. On May 13th, a cashier's check for exactly $15,000 was handed to the venue coordinator. It is a direct, undeniable one-to-one match. We found the same pattern with the custom Vera Wang gown, the ridiculous ice sculptures, and the deposit for the string quartet. My inheritance hadn't just paid for the wedding. It was the sole financial pillar holding the entire event together." Thomas's actual bank accounts were shockingly empty. He was drowning in credit card debt and using my money to maintain his wealthy facade. "We have them dead to rights," Sterling confirmed, organizing the mountain of receipts into a massive legal binder. Not only did Thomas breach his duty, but Helen and Chloe knowingly received stolen assets. "We are going to hit them with a lawsuit so comprehensive it will freeze every single asset they possess." I felt a profound sense of vindication washing over me. For my entire life, my family had made me feel like I was crazy, like my boundaries and my needs were unreasonable. Now, looking at the hard, undeniable legal proof of their treachery, I knew I was right all along. They were parasites hiding behind the sacred shield of family loyalty. We finalized the massive lawsuit, naming Thomas, Helen, and Chloe as defendants. Every single piece of evidence was perfectly aligning to form the ultimate legal guillotine. While I was busy building an airtight legal case, my parents were busy building a massive web of lies. Since I had been officially disinvited from the wedding, the extended family naturally started asking questions. Instead of telling the truth, Helen spun a magnificent, deeply manipulative narrative. My phone started blowing up with text messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins I barely spoke to. "How could you be so cruel?" my Aunt Diane texted. "Your parents have given you everything, and now you're demanding they pay you thousands of dollars just because you're jealous of Chloe?" Helen had told everyone that I was having a mental breakdown, that I was bitterly jealous of Chloe's engagement, and that I was trying to extort my parents for cash to fund a delusional bakery project. The gaslighting was breathtaking in its scope. My cousin Mark called to tell me I was a toxic spinster who needed intense psychiatric help. My parents were successfully painting themselves as the tragic, long-suffering victims of an ungrateful, money-hungry daughter. In the past, this kind of coordinated family attack would have broken me. I would have cried, defended myself, and desperately tried to explain the truth. But sitting in my quiet apartment, looking at the draft of the lawsuit, I felt absolutely nothing for these people. The sheer volume of the messages showed me exactly how efficient my mother's gossip network was. It also revealed who in the family actually cared enough to ask for my side of the story. Exactly no one. They all eagerly swallowed the lie because it fit the dynamic they were comfortable with. Chloe was the star, and I was the difficult problem. I blocked their numbers one by one, feeling lighter with each tap of the screen. I didn't reply to a single text message. I didn't answer a single phone call. I let the rumors swirl and grow, knowing that every lie they told would only make the impending explosion that much more devastating. Mr. Sterling advised me to remain completely dark. "Let them dig their own graves," he said during our weekly check-in. "When the truth comes out, the whiplash will break their necks." I let them paint me as the villain while I secretly sharpened the executioner's axe. The timing of our strike was entirely Mr. Sterling's idea. He understood that serving a lawsuit was about leverage and maximum psychological impact. "We serve them at the rehearsal dinner," he declared, his eyes gleaming with professional malice. "It guarantees all defendants are in one place, and it shatters their public image instantly." The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive, wildly expensive country club. I parked my 10-year-old car down the street and waited for the process server, a tall, imposing man named Greg. Together, we walked past the valet and straight into the private dining room. The room was packed with 50 of their closest friends, the wealthy in-laws, and the very family members who had been harassing me all week. Thomas was standing at the head of the table, holding a crystal glass, loudly toasting to Chloe's perfect future. He froze mid-sentence when he saw me walk through the double doors. Helen's face turned purple with rage. "What is she doing here? Get her out," she hissed, trying to signal the waitstaff. But Greg was faster. He stepped right up to the head table, loudly asking for Thomas, Helen, and Chloe. Before they could fully comprehend what was happening, Greg slapped 3 massive, thick legal envelopes onto the white linen tablecloth. "You have all been formally served," Greg announced, his voice carrying effortlessly over the stunned silence of the room. "This is a civil suit for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty, along with an emergency injunction freezing all associated bank accounts." The wealthy in-laws gasped, their eyes wide with absolute horror. Bradley, the groom, looked at Chloe in total confusion. Thomas's hands began to shake uncontrollably as his eyes darted over the severe legal language. Helen snatched her envelope, tearing it open, her face rapidly draining of all its color as she saw the terrifying dollar amounts we were demanding. Chloe just stared at the thick stack of papers, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream. I stood at the back of the room, my posture perfectly straight, feeling an overwhelming rush of pure, unadulterated justice. The room went dead silent as my father read the first page of the lawsuit. The silence in the dining room lasted for exactly 5 seconds before absolute pandemonium erupted. Thomas dropped his crystal glass. It shattered against the hardwood floor, perfectly mirroring his collapsing facade. "You psycho!" Chloe shrieked, lunging forward, only to be held back by a deeply confused and alarmed Bradley. "What is this? What does this mean?" Bradley demanded, looking frantically from his crying fiancée to my pale, sweating parents. I didn't say a word. I let the lawsuit speak for itself. Thomas grabbed my arm as I turned to leave, his grip desperate and tight. "Sophia, please," he hissed, his voice dropping into a panicked whisper. "You can't do this. My accounts are frozen. How am I supposed to pay the final vendor balances tomorrow morning?" I looked down at his hand, then up at his terrified eyes. "You should have thought about that before you forged my signature," I replied coldly, yanking my arm free. As I walked out into the cool night air, the screaming behind me grew louder. By the time I reached my car, my phone was ringing incessantly. It was Chloe. I answered, putting it on speaker. "The venue just called Dad," she wailed hysterically into the phone. "The bank flagged his cards because of the injunction. They are threatening to lock the doors tomorrow if the final payment doesn't clear. You have to fix this, Sophia. You have to drop the lawsuit right now." I calmly informed her that the lawsuit would only be dropped when my $82,000 was returned in full. "I don't have it," she screamed. I hung up the phone, feeling a profound sense of peace. The extended family members who had called me a toxic spinster were now trapped in a dining room full of screaming, panicking fraudsters. The groom's wealthy parents, realizing they were marrying into a family of literal thieves, were rapidly gathering their coats and demanding answers. I sat in my car for a few minutes, watching the chaos spill out onto the manicured lawn of the country club. My parents had finally been exposed to the one thing they feared most, the truth. The perfect fairy tale wedding was burning to the ground right before her tearful eyes. The wedding the next day was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. Because Thomas's accounts were heavily frozen by the emergency injunction, the venue refused to unlock the grand ballroom. The celebrity florist packed up her massive arrangements and drove away. The exclusive caterer refused to serve the food. In a desperate panic, Bradley's parents had to use their own money to secure a cheap, last-minute tent in a public park just so the ceremony could legally happen. Chloe walked down a muddy aisle, sobbing hysterically in her stolen Vera Wang gown, while half the guests didn't even show up due to the vicious rumors flying around. But the real consequences started on Monday morning. Mr. Sterling absolutely dismantled my father in the deposition room. Thomas tried to play the role of the well-meaning patriarch, but the paper trail was brutally unforgiving. Faced with the very real threat of criminal prosecution for felony fraud, Thomas capitulated entirely. To avoid going to prison, he was forced to sign a legally binding settlement agreement that completely ruined him financially. He had to liquidate his retirement accounts and sell his leased luxury cars just to cover the immediate legal fees. But that wasn't enough to repay the $80,000 he stole from me. Because Helen and Chloe were named as willing beneficiaries of the stolen funds, they were held equally liable for the debt. My parents' marriage rapidly disintegrated under the crushing weight of the financial stress and the public humiliation. The wealthy suburb they had desperately tried to impress now treated them like absolute pariahs. Bradley's family, horrified by the massive scandal and the sheer toxicity of my parents, successfully convinced him to annul the marriage just 3 weeks after the disastrous park wedding. Chloe moved back into my parents' increasingly tense, miserable house, her golden child status completely shattered by the reality of their crushing debt. They had sacrificed everything for the illusion of wealth, and now they were left with absolutely nothing but the bitter consequences of their own actions. The gavel slammed down to echo the final destruction of the family I once loved. It has been 14 months since the explosive rehearsal dinner, and my life looks completely different now. I am currently holding a massive legal lien against my parents' house. When they inevitably sell the property to escape their mountain of debt, my $82,000, plus interest and legal fees, will be the very first thing paid out of escrow. I didn't just get my money back, I got my power back. I cut all contact with Thomas, Helen, Chloe, and every single flying monkey relative who took their side during the smear campaign. Blocking them was the most liberating thing I have ever done. I used a small business loan, which I qualified for easily because my credit was impeccable, to finally open my bakery. It's a beautiful, sunlit space with exposed brick and the constant smell of fresh cinnamon rolls. Every time I unlock the front door, I am reminded of what I survived. If you are reading this and you are dealing with toxic, manipulative family members, please listen to me. Sharing genetics with someone does not give them a free pass to abuse you, steal from you, or treat you like a disposable stepping stone. Do not let them weaponize guilt to keep you compliant. Finding your spine is terrifying, and standing up to the people who raised you will feel like walking through fire. But on the other side of that fire is a life where you are finally respected, even if you have to enforce that respect with a ruthless lawyer. Some days are harder than others. There is a specific kind of grief that comes with accepting that your parents never truly loved you the way you deserved. But I would rather mourn the illusion of a loving family than actively participate in their toxic, destructive reality. I pour all my love into my business, my friends, and my future. Grandma Rose's gift was delayed, but her ultimate lesson was not. I lost my family, but I found myself. I finally bought my bakery and learned that the best revenge is simply living well.